Sorry, I got to talk back to me a little bit better than that. It's just because it's getting late in the day and getting near dinner and all that, and I move and sweat a lot, so I'm going to do that by myself. Let me pray to get us started. Lord, thanks for this day. Thanks for the opportunity to be together and to learn together. We pray that your spirit and your wisdom is with us as we talk and learn from one another, and ultimately from you. In Christ's name, amen. So we're going to talk a little bit about gentrification in here. That's probably going to be kind of the main kind of central topic that we talk around. My plan is to talk for half of this time and then for us to talk together for the second half, all right? So if it gets near half hour and I'm still like running on like some preacher that don't know how to shut up, somebody just just raise your hand like you got a question, and now that'll do it for me. Just kind of quick introduction. My name is Leroy Barber. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I've been trying to find out how many Magic fans are in each session before I start. Any Orlando? All right, good. None in here this time. Hawks fans, that's what I'm talking about. We got beat up last night pretty bad, so I'm kicking all Orlando fans out of the sessions in the beginning. I live in Atlanta. I am originally from Philadelphia, and big Phillies fan in there. So if there's any New Yorkers or those kind of folks, you got to go too. I work with an organization called FCS Urban Ministries, and FCS stands for Family Consultation Services, and it's an umbrella organization that houses about 13 different ministries as a part of that umbrella. And those 13 organizations go from everything from we do housing in the community, we do adopt seniors, youth development. We have a arts ministry that works with dance with kids in the neighborhood. We have an organization that works with immigrants that have relocated to Atlanta, gives them work making jewelry that we sell in a coffee shop that we run, which is also a part of the organization. So we kind of have this umbrella that allows us to have a holistic approach to the community that we're working in. I'm also lead an organization called Mission Year, which is a year-long missions opportunity that allows folks from 18 to 29 to do a year of service in one of 8 cities around the country and in Argentina. I started kind of in urban work about 21 years ago when I was 1, and you think that's very funny.
That's good. You caught me off guard.
I'm actually 22, so. And began with homeless ministry, working with homeless on the streets of Philadelphia, and moved to working in education because we came across so many kids who were homeless in Philadelphia. It kind of connected us to education, and then that, you kind of started 21 years ago, and it just kind of moved, and now I feel like we are involved in this community economic development approach to ministry. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we move through. What's interesting about this idea of gentrification? Is everybody familiar with that term? If you're not, no, okay, so we're good. No, well, it's a term that has just become more popular in the last probably 10 to 15 years, and for the most part, it's an old term that was given to kind of the landed gentry, and those with wealth and resource were called the gentry. And those with wealth and resource kind of controlling the markets per se, where they lived and where they worked and those types of things. The term gentrification comes from that, and it's becoming more popular now in the U.S. as the gentry moves back into cities. And the cities are now becoming more kind of cool downtown areas as opposed to the term inner city, meaning poor, black, or Hispanic. And we'll talk a little bit more about that also. Um, so I moved to Atlanta 14 years ago and moved into a community called Eastlake. And Eastlake was notorious and known for Eastlake Meadows, which was the government housing that was in a part of this community. And it was kind of this notorious government housing facility that made up Eastlake. And Eastlake was known as where you don't go, right? When I moved into Eastlake, those housing facilities were still there. And by the way, moving from Philly to that, I was just wondering why it was notorious. But anyway, that's another story. I mean, it was clean. It was like, I'm from Philly, you know. Anyway. I moved there in 1997, and it was majority African-American. Probably the neighborhood was probably about 95% African-American. High poverty level. Very few businesses. The government housing project, which had, I think, about 1,000 to 1,200 units in it, so it was quite large. I moved out of Eastlake in 2001, and when I moved out of Eastlake, the neighborhood had completely changed. The government housing facility was gone, replaced with mixed income apartments. There's a new Publix supermarket and a bank and a new gas station and a new housing facility and 2 golf courses in 4 years. What happened in Eastlake is probably the story that's happening in every major city in our country. And that is that the gentry, those who typically have lived in the suburbs, are moving into downtown areas. And as they move into downtown areas, those neighborhoods are beginning to become diverse. And the people who live there are being pushed to the periphery of the city, to the suburbs, or right at the rim or the perimeter of cities. In the city of Atlanta, every government housing facility is now closed and has been torn down and has been replaced with mixed income facilities. In Chicago, the most famous Cabrini Green no longer is there, and it's what it was. It's still a small part of it that's still there, but what was Cabrini Green is no longer. And it's happening in every city, in Houston and in Philadelphia, in LA, and every city, every major city is seeing this change happen. And what we're discovering is that there's a new urban landscape. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today from that perspective of what we're seeing. Well, one thing we know is that the whole world is moving to the city. That what used to be popular in building and living in the suburbs, the white picket fence and the dog, is fading away. What was really popular in the 60s is now becoming less popular. In fact, some of the larger philosophy says that the U.S. is just not old enough for this to have happened yet, that in every other city around the world, the wealthy live downtown, and the poor people live out in the country. And you'll see this, if you go to London. Poor people don't live downtown London, wealthy people do. And some of the philosophy is that the U.S. is just getting old enough, and they're seeing this transition happen the way it is everywhere else in the world. But there's something else happening as well. We're seeing a shifting demographic to the U.S. in cities and a growing diversity. As of 2007, half of all of the world's population lives in cities now. 3.4 billion people live in cities. that will double in 20 years. That the projection is in 20 years, there'll be 6 billion people living in cities in the urban context. Right now, 80% of the U.S. population now lives in cities.
How are you classifying cities? I live in central New Jersey, so
We're
halfway between New York, halfway between Philadelphia.
Well, we're qualifying it as populations that are surrounded by like a New York, an LA, a Boston, a Charlotte, a Birmingham, Alabama. So it's not necessarily size, they're different sizes, but there's these kind of centralized locations. Little Rock, Arkansas, places like that. And I'll add a little commercial here. The only reason we haven't seen this go further is because of the current economic developments that have happened in our country, or around the world, really. That has slowed gentrification down, because it was 4 years it took for Eastlake to completely change. Has now slowed down. In the neighborhood where I now live in, I've lived there for 10 years, and it's just starting to change a little more rapidly. The other thing that we see happening here now is where you used to see downtown or inner city neighborhoods were places where people of color lived. Now, half of all people of color live in suburban areas. So it's no longer just a single race living in a place. What we're seeing, along with gentrification, is a growing diversity, which I think is the question that is before us as church planters and as followers of Jesus. What do we do in a diverse world? Because right now, we have no idea, because we're not diverse, right? It's cliche, but Sunday mornings is not a diverse time. Sunday morning, everybody goes where they're comfortable. Everybody goes where people look like them, where people make the same amount of money as them, where the pastor connects with them culturally. So right now, we have no idea what to do with diversity, but it is the question before us as church planters, pastors, and ministry leaders. What do we do about diversity? Because it's on our doorstep. Those government housing facilities that were torn down, mixed income facilities were put back in their places. So they're places where somebody on government assistance lives, and somebody who goes downtown and works in a state house every day live together in the same facility. So what's happening in the world is that the world is growing more diverse because of this, at least in its living. When I started, the term was inner city. And there was kind of this code word, inner city. When I say inner city, you know what I mean, right? When I say inner city, you know I'm talking about black or brown people, right? When I say inner city, you know we're talking about, places where housing is not as great, where there could be some drug activity. There could be, like, inner city was this code word for that, and also this code word for places we stay away from, right? And as time moved on, and more people of color began to move out of inner cities, it still meant the same thing. Right? It's still, like in the mid-90s, inner city still meant poor, black, or brown people, even to people of color who no longer live in the inner city. In fact, now I run a missions organization, and I have people of color that sign up to do missions who know nothing about downtown inner city. Their kids have never been there, never gone to school there. They know nothing about inner city life. In fact, truth be told, half the hip hop rappers never know nothing about living in the inner city. There's a little secret out there. But that shift now has been this shift to urban life, right? Now it's urban or downtown. And that means cool, right? That means the arts. That means cool coffee shops to go and hang out in, right? That means places where young people kind of go and hang. That means places where the old school church is planting new school churches, right? In Atlanta, there's a neighborhood called Grant Park that was gentrified probably about 10 years ago or so. And you used to could buy a house in Grant Park for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. Now you can't buy one for less than $600,000. And this past year, 5 churches decided to plant in Grant Park. Surprising. So what do these shifts mean? What do they mean for us as church planters and pastors? When my church now is an urban church, meaning the community where it exists, there could be black folks and white folks and Chinese folks and Japanese folks, all right there in the same neighborhood. But this church where we are and that we're planning, everybody looks the same. And people we're drawing all look the same. We have a question before us. So there's an argument about gentrification, of course, right? If you walk through Harlem, at certain points you'll get off the train and somebody will hand you a flyer saying, we're fighting the gentrification. We're trying to keep our neighborhood, right? There are folks that are fighting gentrification. They're fighting the fact that those who have money can move into a place and take it over and shift those who are poor out. There's an injustice that exists there, right? Because of what happens, right? A certain group decides we're going to move in, we're going to take over, then some stores are going to come, and this is going to come, and those people who were here, you just kind of get displaced out to the perimeter of a city. But it's my stance that gentrification is a norm. It's not something that we're fighting against now. It's not something that we can put out the fires of now. It is taken over. It's a new American norm. And I say that because I want to get everybody, I want to get followers of Jesus, especially church planners, thinking about, like, what do we do with gentrification, not fight against it, because the fight is over. The cities have changed. They've switched. They've been converted already. The market forces are already beating down and gaining momentum around gentrification. Where it's happened in the big giant cities, I listed like New York, LA, Philly, Boston, those kind of things. It's now trickled down to middle range cities like Birmingham and Carolina, right? And Memphis. I don't want to offend your city saying your little range, but But then we'll see it moving into places like Little Rock. It's starting to, I'm sorry, are you from Arkansas, Little Rock? Okay, all right. I just don't want to offend somebody's city. They think their city is the bomb. Little Rock might think they're the bomb, but yeah, Burlington, Vermont. There you go. I was just in Des Moines, Iowa. And it's gentrifying, but I don't think Des Moines, Iowa is this place to be, but apparently it is. I don't know why. When I was there, it was like negative 10 degrees. Why would anybody? So there's this new American norm that's gentrification. And what do we do with that? The other question is, where are the poor going? Where are the poor being relocated to? What we see in Atlanta and what we see in a lot of other cities are, most cities now have that beltway around them. Does New Jersey have a beltway? I'm from Philly. New Jersey, I got a joke about Jersey. I won't say. I'll leave you alone. They have these beltways around the city, and that's kind of where the poor are relocating to, right at the beltway areas, because there's still some access to public transportation there. People aren't relocating further than that because they wouldn't be able to get to jobs and things, so they're relocating right at the beltways. And you think it was hard living downtown and working at a job that's not paying a livable wage? Live on a beltway and take 3 hours to get to a job downtown that pays you nothing. There's a lot of challenge happening right now for the poor, for those who don't have a voice or resource. But I think is another connection point for us in the church is how are we going to continue to be a voice for the poor, which is within our call. I didn't get some amens on that one. I just make sure that we understand that is part of it. So they're going to the outskirts of cities. So in housing that was built probably when? In the 60s, right? Like right as the civil rights movement was happening, right as the suburbs were establishing, there were all these suburban neighborhoods popping up and apartment complexes all around the city. Well, now that those folks are moving downtown and the poor are moving out to that housing. And so what's interesting is what you'll find now is you got this suburban church that moved out of the city, right? Because they were trying to get away. Now, all of a sudden, the apartment complex that's across from them is filled with African-American and Latino folks who don't have a lot of resource. And they're going, well, should we move again? I like how that's the first question. Should we move? There's actually something else you can do. What are the implications for the church? Is the question that sits before us. What are the implications of the diversity that now exists? What are the implications for the poor that now live in the suburbs, on the outskirts of cities? In Atlanta, the poor that live is such a diverse area that there are 300 Korean churches on the perimeter of Atlanta. 300 Korean churches alone, which is just, that's not Chinese, Japanese, like that's just Korean. There is tremendous diversity that is existing around our cities. Here's a picture. There are 33,000 denominations. 33,000 denominations. 275 new denominations every year. Everyone believes that they have it right. A part of a culture that has divided itself 33,000 ways, trying to deal with a world that is diverse. We got some problems, right? There's very little discussion on unity. Which is interesting in a way, because Jesus' last prayer before he went to the cross for us was dripping in blood around unity. God, make them one, as you and I are one. So that what? so that the world may know you. So literally, the more we divide, the less the world sees Jesus. The more we establish our own, the less people know Jesus. The further we move from the heart of God. I don't know any denomination that denies that prayer. It's there. And it was Jesus' final prayer, gut-wrenching prayer for us. And I don't know if we're living that out. So I'd like to introduce kind of some new ideas about ministry, new paradigms for us to think about. Sunday morning. Is this still the most important hour? Is this still the biggest question for us as a church? In your church plan, right? In your ministry, in your philosophy, like, is this still the most important question? What happens on Sundays? I grew up in a Baptist church. Sunday was it, baby. Preach the word. Be instant in season and out of season. When you finish, brother, you wrap it up with the cross. Right? I grew up Baptist, so that's just kind of how it goes. That's just kind of how it goes. Just so y'all know, I'm not against the church. I'm a proud Baptist. Right? That makes some of you sad, I know. But in this new paradigm shift, if Sunday morning is still the major question, then there's going to be a problem with your church. Like in a world that's busy and moving and diverse, right? And new people moving here and there. If Sunday mornings is still your central focus, you're not going to have any relationships with the community. And without relationships building, diversity is impossible. Because if you're the Black Baptist church on the corner and y'all getting down on Sundays, how are you going to invite somebody that worships differently in your midst? How does it happen? It happens through relationships from Monday through Saturday. Because within that relationship, an understanding comes of what the black church is about and why this is what it is. Like, if I'm just looking at it from the outside, that's not a part of my culture, that's not what I do, I can't go in. And the same vice versa. If your church is singing hymns and real quiet on Sunday mornings, and I like to jump it up a little bit, why should I go in there? What makes me go in there is because I know somebody who's in there. There's a church in Atlanta that just did something pretty brave. They've decided to take the emphasis off of Sunday morning and put the emphasis on what they do during the week and how a church relates to serving the world. Pretty cool move.
So how do they do that?
I just read it a little bit today. It's a guy named Sean King.
They're doing one monthly service. The rest of the month, there's small groups are mobilized. Some of the people acts in community, acts of service, towards things like child sex trafficking, work with the homeless, and things. They just have one major celebration month.
That's a new paradigm, huh? Actually, if you think about it as a new paradigm, but African American churches, before we made it, like, there was one circuit preacher, and that circuit preacher would go around, and they would only have actual church once a month. And And the rest of the other Sundays, they have like small groups in Sunday school. So it's probably not a new paradigm, it's kind of going back to something that's pretty cool. What is the CCD model? This model that says, as we look out and represent the whole gospel and meeting all the needs of the community as best we can as a church, what is that? What are the implications of that, right? So if we kind of see our evangelistic efforts through a community development lens, what that means is our church getting involved in some housing stuff, and our church getting involved in some after-school program stuff, our church getting involved in some sex trafficking issues, our church, and seeing these things as a part of good news. Typically get asked the question, why, so we talk about our housing component, and we talk about how we help folks move from being renters to homeowners, and having a system to help improve credit and show how to take care of a house and all these other things, and celebrate when somebody becomes a homeowner as a church, as a community. And inevitably, the question comes, well, isn't that a waste of time? Why are you doing that when somebody's soul is at risk?
Yeah.
Kind of a funny question from a person who lives in a house and who owns a house. And if that is the case, then why don't we all just sell our houses, and because they're not important?
Yeah.
It's just this dynamic that occurs when we start talking about Christian community development as a part of the gospel message. We get this kickback of, but what about the gospel, right? What about the message? What about evangelism? And I say those things are strengthened. Those messages are strengthened when you, as a church, say, I care about where you live. I care about your kids eating every day during the week. I care about the school in your neighborhood where your kids are learning. Well, why do you care? Here is why. Because I serve this guy, Jesus, and he's taught me to love people. See, I got this philosophy, somebody struggling like that doesn't care about your theology. They don't care about your theology. They don't care whether you're a Baptist or a Presbyterian, whether you think you've been chosen or you chose. Like, they don't care. Right? But they do care about your faith. People do care why you do what you do when you're in a relationship, when you're helping meet needs. Then the questions of life come out. Why are you helping us, like, get a house? You're a pastor or a preacher. That kind of question brings home the gospel in an incredibly powerful way, and puts us in a place to watch people's lives change. Like, we get to see God work. Story after story, like, you're right, I need to stop.
I have a question. What does CCD stand for?
Stand for Christian Community Development. And I am going to stop here and take questions, all right?
Question, as whatever it is, gentrification takes place, and you have people moving back of higher socioeconomic, probably primarily Caucasian whites moving back into a traditional neighborhood that's been traditionally African American or Hispanic. What are practical ways for the church, the congregations to become actually integrated? Is that through shared leadership of whites and blacks, or how's that take place? And what's practical?
Good question. Part of and we're a church plant, so I'm imagining there's probably a few people either planting churches or involved in that. That part of the DNA of the church that I planted 10 years ago was that we would put that in the covenant of the church. These ideas of like serving the poor, these ideas of living in community, these ideas of putting a ring around a church of a mile and a half, and seeing that as our parish. Like, as you're planting, as you're establishing this, as churches are restarting, put this in the DNA of the church. So that when people come in the doors, they know this is what this church is about. So you don't end up, 10 years from now, you got this church that doesn't get it or doesn't feel that as their call. You build that in.
So is your church racially mixed or?
About 50-50.
Okay.
As people move into the community, they look for a church, and we offer them to move in as a part of the church. That's one way, because we're dealing with that gentrification issue. The other thing is we are doing ministry and work in the community through what we call community house gatherings. And so every person in our church is a part of some kind of house gathering that meets on their block, that people just come over for once a week. And they might have a meal together, they might pray, they might not, but it's a way for people to connect, to invite them to a church, but it's also a way to kind of connect the work of the kingdom out in the neighborhood.
FCS Services, you got 13 organizations or 13 missions under one roof. Did y'all start the majority of those, or did you go to existing mission agencies and bring them together?
We started some. We started the housing component. We started the community economic development, the businesses. But then most of the rest kind of came in, joined the collective.
You mentioned the business thing, and you mentioned that earlier. What's the name of that organization?
We have a store called The Marketplace, and you mean overarching?
Yeah.
We call it Community Economic Development, but underneath of it is a coffee shop, community grounds, a thrift store, marketplace, and Refugee Beads, which makes jewelry, and a bike shop.
I have a question. It's kind of a response to that. I think of being multi-ethnic and reaching out into certain communities, there has to be some practical, nature to it. You have to strategize, but it's more than hiring a black worship leader. It's more than hiring the cool white guy with glasses in a certain community. It's genuineness. And a friend of mine, Corey Hicks, he's a rapper out in New Orleans. He and I talk about this a lot, that if you don't develop like a genuine culture of learning from each other, then, and the genuine culture has to be united in Christ. And if it's not, if it's forced, then it's going to be forced. If that makes any sense. And so how do you in your church plant encourage like a genuine jambalaya, a genuine gumbo, if you know what I mean?
Yep, I agree. We call people to be neighbors. So we have a pretty strong emphasis on living in the neighborhood. And so out of that, living in the neighborhood, developing relationships with people, getting involved in some of the sports teams. So one of the persons that goes to our church coaches the baseball team right now. And that team is mixed of kids, black and white and Hispanic. And somebody from our church coaches that. So those types of things create those genuine relationships, because people are going to come together around their kids. We have a poetry night and those kind of things, storytelling time, things like that, where people can come together to relate, kind of just as people. And so those help build what you're talking about. They help build like just a genuine commonality. Our church also does potlucks a lot. Once a month or more, we kind of, after church, have everybody kind of hangs out to kind of build some camaraderie and relationship outside of just coming to service.
Does your church staff run each of these ministries, or does a volunteer oversee them, or is this some business?
Yes, we have a few different pastors that actually volunteer, a couple of them also. So we appoint pastors who aren't paid but who are leading some of that effort.
So they're bivocational?
Mm-hmm.
Your geographical community where your church is located, what size is that? Where you would say your target is?
Our target, our target we made it's about a mile and a half around. So population, I'm not sure, but it exists of probably about 4 or 5 kind of local communities. So the one where I live is about 500 homes, but then it's next to another one with about 500. So that area of a mile and a half is what makes up the church.
How varied is the income there?
Very varied. From a guy that works at CNN as a producer to a woman who's on a fixed income and doesn't work, who's 55. So it goes again.
We're in a pre-gentrified neighborhood in Knoxville. I think you've been to that area not so long ago, but
Oh yeah.
Patrick King was telling me that.
Mhm.
But we're a church plant 6 weeks old. Do you have some practical ways that we can partner up for unity in that neighborhood?
That's great. You might not like my answer, but you're a church plant 6 weeks old, you shouldn't be doing anything. Like, you should be going out, finding out who's in your neighborhood, who are leaders in your neighborhood, what's already going on there, like who runs an after-school program here, who are the teachers that might live here, who are like what's the culture of this neighborhood that we are now a part of. And before we set out to do anything, we're going to find that out, and then we're going to connect to some of those things. We're going to support some of those things, and we might start up something that might be missing, or it might help build that up. But my answer is nothing. Like 6 weeks, you shouldn't be doing anything besides meeting and praying and gathering to hear what God wants you to do.
Oh, by the way, I like your answer.
Thank
It's kind of the track that we're on, but we want to, being the new person, it's hard to start conversations because there's people with the institutional memories, with the ownership. So we want to be in a relationship, but sometimes it's threatening.
It's threatening, but it's hard. Like again, you should be doing nothing for 6 months. Like it's hard to break through all of that. Like the history of a neighborhood, race stuff that's going on, economic stuff that's going on. Like that does not happen fast. Like be okay with like that stillness of doing it. Kind of I like to say, be still and know that I am God. Like at the end of that time, you'll know that I'm in whatever I give you to do. So,
We can talk about listen, reflect, and respond. And that's an incredible way to do it. Simply the opposite.
right, but typically we go in and we're going to save something up in here, right? Right? Something's got to be saved because it needs it, right? As opposed to, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to listen and I'm going to plant myself in places so God can work, right? So that's a totally different model.
What type of resources can you direct us to kind of help prepare us for more of this?
CCDA has a conference every year, once a year in the fall.
Is this your program? You said CCDA?
Yeah, that's Christian Community Development Association.
Okay.
They have a conference every year.
Do you have a website?
CCDA.org. I'm on the board of that organization, and they, and if you want something to read, John Perkins is an incredible story of how this idea of Christian community development fits the gospel. Read anything you can about John Perkins. Beyond Charity is what I recommend. Restoring At-Risk Communities. Those books are invaluable.
Excellent. Thank
Bob
you.
Lupton is another author you might want to read as well.
Would you guys?
That's what I was just whispering.
Oh,
Read through the authors, please.
John Perkins, Bob Lupton, and then I think it's the Lawndale Story. I think might be the book.
John
But it's written by, that one's Wayne Gordon. They're kind of, and actually, I don't know, I think Mary Nelson might be here.
So is Noel.
Oh my gosh. Well, Mary Nelson, Bob Lupton, John Perkins, and Wayne Gordon were kind of four like initial members who started CCDA. And they have been doing this for 30, 40 years in communities around Chicago and Atlanta and Mississippi. Read their stuff. Everything I'm saying is that's the foundation of it came from there.
Who's the lady's name again?
Mary Nelson.
Nelson?
Mm-hmm.
John McKnight is also a good author.
As you centered in community and
John
the
McKnight.
varied economic things going on, people live in. Talk to me about some of the struggles that you faced and some of the wisdom God gave you as you began to work through that. The community we're stepped into is very
We got
polarized.
3 hours for me to talk about my mistakes. The reason I'm so adamant about doing nothing is because I'm let's get it done kind of person. But it's much slower to kind of go into community and to deal with kind of this person, do they like it? Does this person like it? And how do we get everybody kind of involved in it? And, which is much healthier, but much slower. And I like to get things done. So I've made mistakes of moving too fast, pushing the community too fast. And so I would recommend not doing it. Struggle a lot around the slowness of community development. And the patience that calls for.
I was just gonna say it's slow in the beginning, but then when it takes off, the transformation is really
That's
deep.
true. Yes.
And then you're like, oh,
The
right.
transformation happens.
That's why it took me 10 years.
One thing you alluded to earlier that we watched happen in Huntsville. Huntsville, Alabama was a very racially divided city. And the church is very divided. Sunday morning is very divided. But as we've gotten more and more involved in working with you and the resource, what we found is it's bringing black and white church together. We're literally working together in ways that we didn't even see before. And it made me wonder while you were speaking if that's not going to be a unifying catalyst. Because our theologies are sometimes a little different. The way we worship style is a little different, but we both have this burning passion to serve the poor, and it's bringing us together. That's been cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. You will see it's the story of unifying. Was it here? He got a red hat on, that's why I'm ignoring that. Okay, go ahead. All right, good.
How do you balance the program agenda and the people agenda? Because I know it's very difficult to not make it personal. How do you do that?
I think this idea of being, again, I keep referring to being a neighbor. Know that I feel like that is the oil in this deal. Like you and I running programs and projects, those things are good, but man, what keeps it from becoming a machine or becoming dry is being a neighbor. So talk about mistakes and all those kind of things. Some of the ways I've learned the most and been the most effective has been when my kid did something stupid. And I had to, people saw me as, oh, you're not a perfect dad. No, I'm not. And I relate to my neighbors as people on that level. So what that does is inform what I do as a program. So if I have a program that's a basketball league that we need to start up to help the boys in our neighborhood play basketball, that's because my son also needs something to do. And so this program is not just about it's not just about me doing something for everybody else, it's about me joining in that as well, because my sons need something to do. So it kind of keeps that balance.
Have you, in your dealings, have you dealt with refugees and the refugee community?
We have a little bit. I mentioned we
have
working.
5,000 refugees in Vermont. We're working with a community in Burlington, trying to teach English. But I'm trying to get some feedback from people that have had experiences
I don't have a whole lot of experience, but there's an organization called Word Made Flesh. That I'm going to look up and talk to them a little bit about that.
Thank you.
What city you just was St. Louis?
St. Louis.
My nephew lives there, and I know he's part of a church that has a urban church and a suburb church, but they work in but they're doing this strategically, finding houses in neighborhoods, not taking over neighborhoods, but just strategically having people buy homes, which he bought an abandoned home and restored it all. And their goal is to go there and help single moms with babysitting, whatever they need, just to kind of be an arm and an outreach to live in the community and to reach them.
I think things like that are needed. The only other thing I would do is make sure I connect it to a local organization that's kind of, living.
And they probably are. I just don't know all the details, but I know they're strategically trying to help.
That's very much needed.
Because they got, his wife's a stay-at-home mom. She's got time. She can babysit kids.
Well, we're going to wrap it up. If there aren't any more questions, thank you guys so much for coming.